Okay, we'll call the regular meeting of council for January 25th, 2021 to order at 3 p.m. And I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that council adopt the agenda for this regular council meeting, January 25th, as amended to add item 8.2, which is going to read requesting stop work order on all exploration in former Class 2 lands in regards to our involvement in the coal fight. So, Councillor Kinghorn with amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll give you that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. And I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Masterman that the following items be adopted by omnibus motion in accordance with council's procedure bylaw, being the minutes from the special council meeting January 11th, regular council meeting January 11th, special council meeting January 18th, and council strategic priorities chart.
I'll make that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Motion carries. There are no public comments, so we'll move into the public hearing regarding amending Animal Bylaw 4567/2019. This public hearing is held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M26, and amendments thereto. I hereby declare the public hearing relating to Bylaw 4585/2020 now open at 3:01 p.m.
Thank you. So the purpose of Bylaw 4585/2020 is to amend Bylaw 4567/2019, which is the animal bylaw to allow for the keeping of urban pigeons. The public hearing has been advertised on the Town of High River's webpage and social media pages, and notice was advertised on the Town Crier on December 24th and January 15th, and in the High River Times on December 18th and January 8th. The public hearing notice was also posted at the town office. To date, 2 requests to speak have been received, and 8 letters and 2 videos in opposition to the amendment.
15 things going on. Following rules of conduct, make sure my mic is on. Yeah. Following rules of conduct will be followed during this public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point. It shall be limited to 5 minutes in length. The order of presentation is protective services, those supporting the bylaw, those opposing the bylaw, any other person deemed to be affected of the bylaw. Council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes. There will be no debating the bylaw. Respect for staff, developers, council, and the public will be maintained at all times. Protective services, please, Peter, and I will be keeping you to 5 minutes in length because we have already had one public hearing regarding this bylaw before, so we're just rewinding a small portion of it, please, Peter.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Peter Generou, Manager of Protective Services. I won't dive into the background too much. It's in your report and you're well aware of the background on this. I will just kind of get into more of the specifics of the amending bylaw and the 4 areas that we targeted in order to form this bylaw. So those areas were flock size, loft size, loft setbacks, and licensing. So for flock size, we've established where a recommendation in the bylaw was 10 pigeons. We came about for this number on a few factors. If you recall the public engagement that we did in High River in 2019, during that public engagement, there were 48% of folks surveyed that didn't want pigeons, and then 30% that said yes to pigeons. But a second question that we did ask was if pigeons were permitted, how many would seem reasonable? And of those that responded, 50% said 1 to 6 pigeons, and 8% said 7 to 12 pigeons. And then 29% said no pigeons at all. Aside from the public survey, we also looked at other municipalities and found there is quite a variance in the number of pigeons. Of the municipalities that we looked at, a few, for example, Fort Saskatchewan was 4 pigeons. Edmonton was 75 with a limitation of 20 that were out at any one time if they're out on flight for exercise. Spruce Grove was 5, Leduc was 40, and Lloydminster was 3, just to name a few there. There were some communities that didn't have limits. For example, Calgary in their current bylaw doesn't have any limits, but it might be of interest to council that a recent survey for their animal bylaw asked residents how many pigeons, and the majority have said 1 to 10 pigeons for the city of Calgary in a recent survey. The number of pigeons also allowed us to help reduce the number of flocks when we have multiple owners in a community in High River to keep those numbers down for the whole area. The other area of focus was loft size, and the loft size that we've set out is 9.2 meters squared for the space with maximum height of 1.98 meters. To add to that, it's also within the bylaw that it's for each pigeon or bird in the loft, it's 0.5 meters cubed for each bird. North American recommendations tend to be in square feet for pigeons, but meters cubed is more of a European standard, and more specifically was out of Belgium. And by having it in cubic meters per pigeon, it allows for sufficient oxygen and air, causing less stress on the birds and less risk to them. With that being said, the more space, the better.
So remaining, Peter.
Okay, thank you. So with that, the more space was the better for the pigeons. The next couple were loft setbacks, which were 2 meters from property lines. And the last one was licensing and regulation for pigeon ownership to be in good standing with an organization. And then that would help administration with the control and understanding ownership. Other than that, I'll end it there and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Peter. Questions from council. Councillor Masterman.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Thank you, Peter. Just a very quick question. Peter, are any of the pigeons that are in town now, are any of them there with the blessing of the town?
No, not right now. No.
Okay. The reason I asked that is it's my understanding that we didn't allow pigeons at all until a couple of town managers ago did give permission for 1 pigeon or 1 pigeon owner, and then things just kind of grew from there. So just trying to get that clear in my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify that. So when the bylaw one came into the new animal bylaw came into force, we did current pigeon owners or current complaints or files were put on hold till we revisited an amending bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
No further questions. Thanks very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Kara, who is in the waiting room?
So I'll bring in Francisco and Nasir together.
Okay, thank you. Nasir, you can hear us? And Francisco?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Good
Okay.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so Nasir, we're gonna give, everybody's got 5 minutes today, so I'll give you a 1-minute warning at 4 minutes.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
I'd like to go, I guess, after the whatever the proposals are, and then I can at least hear what we're going to be talking about. Then I can put my emphasis in regards to the pigeon keeping part.
Are you asking me a question?
Oh, no, I'm just asking, see if it's possible for me to, I guess, listen to what the amendments are based on what I've read. Or do you want me to just go ahead and
Yeah, we need you to just go ahead with public hearing. So this is your turn, your time to
Okay.
speak.
Awesome. Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for your time and allowing me to speak again. My name is Nasser. I'm with Calgary Racing Pigeon Club, and I've been the president of Calgary Racing Pigeon Club for the past 4 years, and part of the Canadian Union and also American Union and IF for the past 20 years. So I'm just here to speak on behalf of our members, Calgary Racing Pigeon Club members, Francesco, Mervyn, and quite a few others that is in High River. And we've spoken a couple of months earlier in regards to some of the amendments that we were talking about as far as the pigeon keeping or for racing homers were concerned. From what I see, I mean, it's awesome that everybody's on board as far as the amendment is concerned, but the number of birds that's been mentioned and as far as the square footage of the loft that's been mentioned, I don't know where that come from, but I was hoping that whoever was looking after the amendments and as far as the new ruling towards the pigeon keeping was concerned would consider looking into Chestermere bylaw as well as Calgary bylaw, because if you really look at it, a pigeon, a homing pigeon for sure, or any pigeon would look as they would require at least a square foot of the area per pigeon in a loft. Some of these lofts that's been in High River, they've been there probably 5-6 years or maybe 7 years in existence, and they've obviously they're a bigger size. And as far as our homing community is concerned, our own racing pigeons are concerned, we need on a given year, like when we're breeding young ones, we might have 50-60 young ones, but by the end of the season we might cut down to 20 if we have that many remain, because of the existence of hawks out there and also the racing aspects of it, because in this kind of sport anything is possible as far as losing birds and all that stuff is concerned. So I was a little bit wary when I saw those wording as far as the square footage of the loft and also the number of birds were concerned. And I was also approached by some other fanciers, which is related to Fancy Pigeon Club. I think there's quite a few in High River, but I don't think they have any representation today, like as far as them talking. But pigeon keeping would come as a whole, and they would be part of obviously an organization, which is the Pigeon Fancy Association. But we're under obviously a different umbrella, which is the Calgary Racing Pigeon Club or Canadian Racing Pigeon Union. Other than that, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Nasir. Francisco, we'll give you 5 minutes.
Good afternoon to all of us here. I'm Francisco Ceballos, residing here in High River. In behalf to all the members of Calgary Racing Pigeon Clubs residing here in High River, and also to thank you to our club president, which is present in here. Today, for some, we will stand with our presentation during the last session was attended, and hoping that the old bylaw will be amended fairly to everybody who are residing here in High River. So, thank you, and that's all.
Thanks, Francisco. Council, any questions for either of these gentlemen? Councillor Masterman?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks, guys, for the presentation. I just have a really quick question for either one of you. I believe Nasser told us back in September when you spoke, Nasser, that you thought there were maybe 8 or 9 members in High River with 20 to 30 birds each. And I'm just wondering, A, if those numbers are still valid, or if you have better numbers today, and B, if we were to put a limit on the number of birds, I'm just wondering, if we said, let's say 10 birds, let's say, because 10 was one of the numbers that majority of residents talked about that they might. So if we were to do that, would the members give up the excess birds voluntarily, or would we have to have Bylaw come and visit the people and force this to happen? I'm just kind of wondering from your perspective how you might see that happening. If suddenly you had to give up several birds from each loft or whatever.
Yeah, sorry, I can, it's Nasser again here. I appreciate the concern there, but from my understanding, when we spoke in September and we talked about like the aspects of homing pigeons in general and what we go through as far as the sport itself is concerned, like during the full season, pigeon keeping is worse than keeping dogs and cats, I'll tell you. It's 24/7 as far as their health management is concerned, their feeding is concerned. It's very involved. And I'm sure when we talked about earlier in September, I gave quite in-depth information, but we don't need to go through that right now. But as far as some of these guys, as I mentioned, they've been in High River probably for maybe 10 years, some of these guys, and they've got existing lofts, which should have been father-in-law in when they came into play, because they didn't know if there was anything existed as far as bylaws are concerned. Now, as far as membership is concerned, because of the COVID restrictions, we haven't had our AGM this year. In 2020, we usually get together in November and have an AGM, and then we know exactly what kind of membership we're going to have. Because of all those restrictions, we don't know exactly how many members we're going to have from High River and surroundings. But I'm hoping and I'm thinking that they're all going to be part of it once we have the meeting, and then we can follow through as far as the membership is concerned. Now, coming into as far as number of birds are concerned, especially homing pigeons, and a full season cycle, when we're breeding right now, it's a breeding season for the young birds, and then we raise these young birds in coming months of July, August, September, and then we shut them down. So we could breed very easily, depending on the loft, anywhere between 50 to 60 babies, and then by the end of the season they go down to probably 10 for the following year. So whether it's going to be a circumstance of them getting lost in the races, or maybe by birds of prey, or any other injuries, because we don't know. It's a sport. As I say, they're free to go when they're released to train home, so they could hit wires, or anything is possible. But number of birds, that should be also, that's what my concern is right now. Also the loft size, because what was stated there on the actual bylaw, I don't know who researched that and from where they got the information from, as far as the actual capacity for the actual loft is concerned for these birds. So I'm hoping that I've answered most of your question. If not, please come back to me, and whatever the question is, then I can try to my best of ability to answer those questions.
Thank you.
No further questions from council. So thanks, Nasser and Francisco. Kara, is Ken King?
Yes, he is. I'll let him in.
Thank you. Mr. King, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, the floor is yours. You've got 5 minutes, please.
Do I go on a Zoom or do I just talk?
Either or.
I can't see anybody, but I can talk. I can talk to myself.
Okay, we can hear you, so we're good to go.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Ken King. I'm the Vice President of the Canadian Racing Pigeon Union, and I live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, where I've had racing pigeons since the early 1960s. Our club helped the city of Saskatoon write the bylaw for our city. So yes, I'm in favor of a bylaw for responsible pigeon fanciers. A bylaw protects the general public and makes sure the pigeon owners are following all the rules. Pigeon owners need to follow, especially if they want to fly pigeons and enter the club races. In this case, with the Calgary Racing Pigeon Club. And they fly 100 to 600 mile races from the middle of May to September of each year. I likely don't have to tell you that these pigeons are in excellent shape and under control of the owner, and likely are fed better than our families are fed, especially to fly these distances week after week. I could give you a long list of so-called famous people that had racing pigeons over the years, but I'll spare you the time by telling you the Queen has a loft of pigeons. Plus, pigeon carried messages from the enemy lines in both world wars, including the Gulf War. The Calgary Pigeon Club released pigeons at the official opening of the 1988 Winter Olympics. Now I'll get on to your bylaw as it says. I'm a little disappointed that the CU didn't have more input into the proposed bylaw, especially with the information that we sent in April of 2020. It didn't show up in your minutes till September of 2020. Now I'm sure COVID and virtual meetings had something to do with that, so we won't belabor that point. That's why I asked for the letter from the CU from the Sue Wilshire to be submitted again. The CRPU concerns with your bylaw is the number of pigeons stated at 10, the size of the loft, which I had to try and convert from meters to square feet, but I'm sure I have that figured out. And while we're not concerned about the license fee, we wanted to talk about the license fee. The number of pigeons in the bylaw suggests in each backyard loft is 10. This is likely not a very practical number. Most bylaws, in fact, don't have an exact number. However, it's calculated based on the size of the loft. Keeping in mind that many have a larger number, that they may have a larger number male during breeding and young bird racing season. Some bylaws have a number that's adjusted during young bird season. Number two, the size of the loft. Most pigeon flyers and or fanciers would have more than one loft in their yard, or would have one large loft with 2 or 3 sections. Those sections would probably be 10 by 10 each. Example, one section would be for breeding and one for racing, or one for old birds and one for young birds. In addition to the loft, normally a loft would have an aviary or a fly pen, so birds can see out and get bearings and have fresh air. As far as the fee goes, bylaws are all over the map, but I can assure you that some of the newer bylaws that have now been implemented in the last few years, yearly fees are request for permission. They do not ask for a yearly fee, but request for a permission to have a loft and pigeons.
Mr. King, Mr. King, just respectfully, we've got 1 minute left in your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, where were we? Some of the areas in towns and cities that have looked into bylaws recently have found that the issue is not normally the pigeon fanciers or the racing pigeon keepers that are the concern. Their cause issues, their fact, is by the wild or feral pigeons that are the issue. And believe me, as a racing pigeon guy, I do not want wild feral pigeons around in my loft. The local clubs govern our membership and follow up on any concerns about our members. All members have to make sure that they abide by the bylaws of the area that they live in. I speak in favor of the bylaw for with the few minor changes I mentioned. I'm sure I can speak for the Calgary Club and the Canadian Racing Pigeon Club that we are willing to help modify the bylaw for the betterment of all concerned. I want to thank you for my time and I appreciate it. So we would expect a bylaw to be in place. Thank you. If you had any questions, I'd be willing to answer them.
You bet. Thanks very much, Mr. King. Question from Councillor Masterman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. King, for the presentation. I just want to double check on one thing very quickly with you. You said the racing pigeons are under control. I'm sure you don't mean that they come when they're called. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what you mean by they're under control?
If they're under control, they would normally come when I whistle or I feed the pigeons. They all return to their loft. That's what I mean by under control.
Okay.
The biggest thing you can control them with is feed and water. More so feed than water.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah, no, thanks
in order for someone to fly pigeons in a competitive race, he would have to have control over them when they come home to enter the loft so that he can record that the birds are home.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, or?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I have no other questions, Mr. King, so thanks very much for attending today and bringing your thoughts to us. Appreciate it.
I really want to emphasize the fact that we had two bylaws submitted back in April, and I'm led to believe that they never showed up at the committee or at the council meetings.
Okay. I'll follow up with Peter on that. We would have liked, we felt we were being involved, but we only found out about this issue Friday afternoon after the fancy pigeon people phoned us, and they said they don't have any members in our area and that possibly we should be helping the pigeon people or the racing fellow out. And we thought we were involved in it right from the get-go, but obviously not. Yeah, but that's surprising because we've been working on this for 2 years now to get this pigeon.
And we feel we've been involved with it for a year and a half, and
Okay.
now we seem to be on the back door. Anyway,
Okay.
that's our.
Thanks, Mr.
And
King.
any other questions? I would be most interested to help out.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Those opposing the bylaw, I think we had 8 letters of submission from residents opposing the bylaw. None of them are here wishing to speak today. They submitted their correspondence, written correspondence. So is that correct, Kara, that covers everybody?
That is correct.
Thank you. Hereby declare this public hearing relating to bylaw 4585/2020 closed at 3:29 p.m. We'll move on to the bylaws 4589/2021 operating line of credit. Leanna?
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to have a few moments here of your time just to discuss our annual operating bylaw.
You got a dog.
We got a puppy for just after Christmas. So anyways, so last time that we brought an operating bylaw in front of you was in 2017. Administration was under the point of view that we only needed to bring this back to you every 3 years. That is incorrect. What is correct about the 3 years is if the advertising is for 3 years. So we are coming back on an annual basis to ensure that we are doing things correctly in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. And we do realize that we are not anticipating to have to use our operating line of credit, but we do need to ensure that if it does come the case, especially in this state of our economy, that it is available to us. Does any of you have any questions?
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Leanna. I actually have quite a few questions. My first question is actually, because I've been poring over the MGA to find out where it says this is an annual requirement. And when I look at the section 251.1 and 2 and 3 of that, as well as 256.1, 2, 3, I don't see anywhere where there's a request, an obligation for one to be done annually, unless there's going to be a change in the bylaw. So I really would like to know exactly where this particular point is, because I saw the general comments making it sound like this was an error in the past, and I don't see how it's been a negligent act before. So that's my first question, please.
Administration's review of 251 subsection 1, 256 subsection 1, 256 subsection 2, and 256 subsection 3. Under our interpretation, it was that this should be coming back on an annual basis, because we would have the availability to go back to the Royal Bank to borrow the money.
But I guess that's where I'm confused. And I know this bylaw was created January of 2017, but when I was thinking about past discussions where, like, I was under the impression that the mayor and finance signed a yearly agreement with the bank for an allotment. And so, because I guess that's where, when I'm looking at this, and it seems so much like it's absolutely a mandatory thing annually, I don't see that in, I think it's misleading to say in accordance with the MGA, because it doesn't say that. And yet you've got that letter that the mayor and finance would be giving to the bank. So I'd like a little bit of clarification of that as well, please, Leanna, before I ask my other questions.
I will have to actually do a little bit more research with the Royal Bank. I do recall that the Royal Bank does need a copy of the bylaw after it has been signed by council.
So I guess my question though about that is, unless we're changing the bylaw, why do we need a bylaw on an annual basis unless there's a change? Because that, if that's the case, we'd be changing every bylaw every year.
Also within our bylaws, we bring back an annual property tax bylaw on an annual basis because the rates do change. And I also see this as a different way on collecting of funds or getting funds for our organization. So I believe this should be annual as well. Kara and Chris, if you have any insights, please jump in.
And I do have other questions as well. If I'm sorry, but I do have a few questions about this.
Thank you, Leanna. Councillor McMillan, certainly, I guess the Municipal Government Act's open to interpretation, and I think one of the clauses operate, if you take a look at subsection 250 or section 256, subsection 3, it talks about advertising only for every 3 years. Mm-hmm. The number that does keep changing within our borrowing bylaw will be the amount of our line of credit, because it be based upon our revenue that is generated from that perspective, that calculation. So from a best practice perspective, keeping council in the know of when we are going to our line of credit or renewing this line of credit aspect of things is probably best practice for us to bring this back on an annual basis so the council's aware of it. Having it open at $7.5 million or plus per year as a rotating line of credit, even though there's not, council should be aware of it from that perspective. Certainly could be more of a contingency or a addition of the banking aspects of things, and that will be something that Leanna will have to look into and get an answer from the Royal Bank on that perspective. But in past positions that I've worked in, it has been an annual bylaw that's come forward, and it's done in respect to recoup to balance out the costs associated with the taxes that you would be claiming on or collecting on July 1st to cover those expenses from January 1st to July 1st.
So just making a comment that I think it's a little bit dangerous to say that the MGA is open to interpretation, because and that's just a comment. And now I'm confused because you mentioned a $7.5 million line of credit, and I was under the impression that this bylaw is saying 4 million.
The bylaw is, sorry, Chris, the bylaw is saying 4 million. What we have, 7.5 million, that is what we have as outstanding debt at the end of December of 2020.
It's just the way when Chris said about having this $7.5 million credit line, it's 4 million. My other concerns about this is I don't see how the $20 million tax levy can be correct, because it appears to me that the school and seniors requisition have been included, and these actually do not belong to the town. And so when I went back to December 14th, when we were having our budget, the actual total tax levy is the 14.3 million municipal tax. So I feel that should be amended, because this is misleading. We don't have tax levy of over 20 million, because the seniors requisition and the school request, that's not town, that goes to them.
We still need to collect it on behalf of them and forward the money on a quarterly basis to the school districts, or to, sorry, the municipal affairs, and we pay the seniors annually.
Right, but how can we have our line of credit based on taxes that aren't actually staying within the municipality?
The property tax bills that we send out to every resident and business owner is for all 3 levies. And so those are outstanding accounts receivable balances. So that money that is owed to the town, we know that we then reimburse municipal affairs for this education tax levy, and this West Wind for the seniors. So it is outstanding money to other organizations.
I guess that just doesn't really sit well with me, but and I guess my other concern is why I think $4 million for an operating line of credit. Like, I'll ask my question, why do you think we need $4 million for an operating line of credit? Why not something like $1 million? But I'm wondering, do you have operating costs already that you're aware that we need a $4 million line of credit?
To turn the lights and on the streets, to pay our staff, to pay any...
A line of credit though. So you're telling me that as of right now, if we don't approve this, the power is going off in High River and people aren't going to be fed?
I am not saying that, Councillor McMillan. This is a just in case. I honestly, and administration does not feel that we are actually going to use our line of credit, but we need to ensure that we have the capacity and the authorization. If we need to, we can use the line of credit.
And I hope, Leanna, I'm sorry if I'm coming across a little bit cross, but I actually kind of am, not at you. I'm just saying that fiscally, like taxpayers here, we are all taxpayers on council here, and we represent ratepayers. I don't understand, like I guess when it comes down to the motion, I would like to amend that the operating amount is the amount of $1 million. And that way it frees up some more money in case I don't understand why we wouldn't be thinking about the rainy days in case an unexpected capital. Like, I just think 4 million as a rainy day, just in case we need it operationally, it doesn't make sense.
The Royal Bank here in High River had recommended the 4 million. At one point, we had actually had a higher line of credit. I believe it was 7 million if we go back 2 bylaws previous, and we've reduced it to 4.
And so I'm just saying, because when I was reviewing the budget, December 14th, unless my head's in the clouds, I thought the town of High River was in an extremely strong financial position. And so that's why I'm asking, why do we need a $4 million line of credit for operating?
Well, let me help clarify something, maybe Leanna. So the line of credit is only a piece of paper. We are not withdrawing anything out of that line of credit.
That is correct.
It's just my business has X number of dollars as a line of credit. I don't use it. But with COVID here, it's a very, very important thing that it sits there. And if I have to access that cash easily, I can do that. But it's sitting at 0 right now, as this will be. So we are only, what Leanna is asking for is that we authorize that we have a line of credit. She's not authorizing that we withdraw and take the 4 million out tomorrow.
No,
right?
I understand that. And I understand that, Mayor Snodgrass, but what I'm saying is, why can't we have that bump down to $1 million? Because this is kind of, I don't know, it just, my spider senses were tingling when I saw this. This is why I'm just saying, from my perspective, what is wrong? If we're saying we don't need it, what's wrong with $1 million? You know, I don't understand why it has to be 4. I think because it's kind of like, does that mean that, oh, okay, if $4 million worth, like, is it going to come back to council before it's drawn on? I think 1 million, if we're so in such a strong financial position, I don't understand 4 million. And it's my comments, but I'd like to hear, of course, from my wonderful peers, but am I just out to lunch? I don't think so.
Well, on what, a $34 million budget that this town has, 34, I can't remember the exact number now, but $34 million. Having a $4 million line of credit on an organization this size definitely does not seem to be out of the scope.
Mayor Snodgrass, if I could add in, and to answer Councillor McMillan's question, we are in a strong financial position. Don't misinterpret that. We are in a very strong financial position. Those funds are within reserve funds, and they require certain resolutions to be completed to withdraw those funds for specific purposes and are in specific segments of our operation. The line of credit here, and probably the simplest way I can put it, is that because we don't get our revenue until July 1st, majority of our revenue until July 1st, this is just in case our savings right now that we have in general operating and our general cash reserves is not enough to cover up until July 1st. Once July 1st hits, that line of credit will be paid off in full if we even use it. In 26 years of being in local government, I have not been part of any single municipality that's used their line of credit. But it's there just in case, and our banks typically require us to have a line of credit of some kind in the event of an emergency, in the event of, a great example would have been the flood of 2013 to make sure employees still got paid. Our payroll on a monthly basis is significant. And 4 months, we would be well beyond that $1 million line of credit. And that's not including any other payment to any of our other vendors or suppliers that we have to pay on a monthly basis in our general operating fund. So that's the purpose. It's the cover. It's to be that safety net from January 1st into July 1st when we get all our revenue. All our revenue comes in July 1st. And that's what this is. This is a bridge amount to have just that safety net in case we need it for whatever purpose.
Well, and I appreciate the feedback, but I guess where I'm really struggling still is understanding why the seniors requisition and the school is included as part of
It's a
that
liability.
calculation.
Yeah, Councillor McMillan, it's a liability on our books. We collect it and we have to remit it. So
Right.
it's our payment. We cut the check directly to those entities and we are required to remit it. So it has to be recorded on our books from that perspective, from the county perspective.
Oh, and I knew it'd be recorded, but I guess it was just wondering how.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Bruce, no further questions? You had your hand up for a bit. It was answered. Okay, I will ask for a motion from Councillor Nychuk that council give first reading to bylaw 4589 2021, and that council give second reading to bylaw 4589 2021, and that all council present give unanimous consent to proceed with third and final reading of bylaw 4589 2021. Councillor Nychuk.
Yes, Mr. Snodgrass, I'll give you those motions. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? Doing raise of hands now. Motion is carried. Ask for a motion from Councillor Cooey that council give third and final reading to bylaw 4589 2021.
I will give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Leanna. Swimming pool, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I was about to say another word, but I corrected myself.
Nychuk already did it.
Yep. So thank you, Mayor and Council. This report is to present to you the options available for moving forward, and if Council so chooses to move forward with an addition to our pool facility and adding a leisure type pool to the facility. As you guys are all aware, this is one of your top 5 priorities and has been a priority since January 2020. Certainly COVID has been a kind of a little bit of a speed bump in our process on this, because just a week before we were supposed to go on a tour of several facilities and take a look at examples across the province of how they were operating from that perspective. So this recommendation that's before you today is to proceed to the next step of a simple addition to our existing pool of a leisure type pool with a spray pad, a water slide, hot tubs, and a sauna, to move that forward to the next step and ask the question of the public. And that is through a referendum process that will be bookended with the municipal elections this fall in October, to actually get a decisive answer from the public, whether or not they wish to pay for this, both the capital cost as well as the operating expenses. If this recommendation is supported, we would begin preparations with bylaws coming forward in the subsequent meetings to prepare for the referendum, and having those questions finalized so that the ballots can be prepared from that perspective. Organizationally, we expect that this will require at least 250 hours from several of our staff, including myself, the Director of Engineering and Recreation Operations, Manager of Legislative Services, various staff from Communications and from Aquatics as well. And that are 200 hours in 2021 for each of us. This will be a significant time commitment to move this forward. We would have to also conduct a public consultation process so to inform the public. Council on the tact associated with that would determine whether or not they wish to promote it or just to be there to listen to the comments and let the vote lie where it may. Financially, it is proposed that we borrow $15 million for vertical infrastructure or buildings from that perspective to complete the capital cost to construct the engineering and design from that perspective. In 2019, the preliminary estimates at that time had about just under $14 million. We've added a little bit more contingency based upon some knowledge of soil conditions and further exploration of the soil conditions that we need to take a look at. Plus, our lessons learned from the fire hall renovation is renovations come with unforeseen issues that surprise you all the time, no matter how good your information is. We believe $15 million will deliver the pool addition that's proposed within this report, and allow council to ask that question of the public whether or not they wish to borrow the money. The cost of the borrow of $15 million will be approximately $130 per parcel per year for 25 years. Now we've taken a look, I've taken a quick look at looking at it from an assessed perspective. If we applied it on an assessment perspective, it would hit our businesses substantially more than our residential homeowners. So taking a look at a different kind of local service area concept with a parcel tax apportioned out to every individual parcel on an equal basis seems the more equitable and fair approach from that perspective. In addition, we expect operational costs to go up by 47% or $1.5 million annually to cover the cost to operate this expanded facility. And that's part of the business case. Now, we are being very conservative. We are not suggesting that our revenue is going to increase substantially. We're going to be holding the line on that and preparing people to be aware that there could be almost $1 million shortfall in operations from that perspective, or a 4.95% tax increase to cover those costs. As I stated, this is consistent with council adopted policy. It is one of your strategic priorities and has been identified for some time with some of the studies that have been taking place and undertaken since at least 2018. It is also consistent with our financial management framework, which outlines where debt may be used for the construction of new facilities and vertical infrastructure. If this recommendation is adopted, staff will begin laying out the detailed timeline, what the community engagement will look like, the communications plan associated, the referendum question, and get that all back to council for approval. We expect engagement will start in late April, early May, and continue on through the summer until middle of September. In consideration of COVID, we will have to take a different approach. It will not be the typical townhouse or town hall type meetings, open houses. It will be an online Zoom type approach from that perspective, and other ways to collect the views or share, not so much collective views, but share the information we prepared with the public. So since 2018, council has been talking about this and has prepared several reports. This proposal is talking about a 1,300 square meter addition to the existing pool facility and renovations to the existing facility. So approximately 9,500 square feet of new construction with about 4,500 square feet of renovated space will be part of the proposed project. I've included two conceptual layouts, and they are just concepts at this point in time. I know that there's been concern about shared change rooms. Those are just concepts. We will be fleshing those concepts out as if we move past the question and if it is supported and if council chooses to proceed or not to proceed. Now, through this whole process, because this referendum will be asking a key question, council at any time can back out of this process. If they feel the time is not right, if they feel that the vote's not going to be successful, they can back out. Even after the vote has been held, council could determine at that point in time that it's not feasible to proceed based upon the conditions financially for the municipality or the local economy. Council, before you have four options to consider. One, to proceed with the recommendation as proposed and direct staff to begin the process of building the referendum package and the community engagement process. Number two, you could choose not to proceed at this point in time. Defeat the recommendation, and this will no longer be a priority. Something else will move on to the priority list, and this will move off the priority list for the time being until the next strategic priority setting session with the new council. Council could also direct administration to develop additional concepts prior to moving forward. And those concepts may incorporate some of the comments that we received in the 2008 public consultation that included fitness center, climbing wall, children's play space, additional gymnasium space. Perhaps there is an alternate concepts out there not involving a pool that the community wants more than the aquatic facility. Or we could also consider a standalone facility somewhere else in the community. Financially, we can't afford that from that perspective, but we could look at different avenues to generate revenue. We could look at P3 partnerships and different business cases from that perspective. And finally, council could choose to refer this back to committee of the whole for recommendation and review and further discussion. The recommendation before you today is being supported by administration to proceed to the next step of this referendum process to ask the question of the public. Yes or no, do the public wish to see an expansion to the Aquatic Center for the community of High River? Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass and Council, for allowing me the time to present.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'm just looking for a little clarification, Chris, and I read it and I heard you reiterate it in your statement. But we're talking close to 1,000 hours just to prepare for a referendum on this issue. That seems to be a lot of time. That's almost just in yours, that's over a month of your time, specifically on this one issue. Can you expand on that a bit, please?
Councillor Kinghorn, there's lots of parts and pieces to this that still need to be fleshed out. We still need to build the public education package as well. That is going to take some time. It all needs to be vetted through senior leadership. It needs to be vetted through communications. It needs to be vetted through council. We anticipate that there'll be no less than 3 to 4 some kind of public engagement opportunities, and preparation for each one requires upwards of 20 hours to prepare from that perspective. When you start adding up all the hours for each specific engagement piece, the hours start adding up. Plus, that includes what we estimate to be one-off phone calls from the residents of the community to say, hey, I want some more information. Can we meet one-on-one? Can we meet online one-on-one? Can you take my phone call from that perspective? So while it may be high, my experience is that these kind of processes and projects seem to take a lot of time. And if you want to do them well and get the information out there well to the community, it takes an investment in that time and those key individuals moving this forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Masterman.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks, Chris. I suspect councillors will be looking at the same number of hours to be answering questions, and those probably aren't factored into that. But just one quick comment and then a question, and then I just wanted to point out that I was the one who raised questions about the shared change rooms, and my question was based more on ignorance than anything. Once I found out a little bit more about them, I have no concerns at all. I'm wondering, and I should have just asked Dawn as a historian, has High River done a referendum on anything? I was trying to remember. Yeah, I can't remember one. And it's interesting because my perspective on referendums has changed a lot. Pre-2013, before I came on council, I always kind of viewed referendums as councillors taking an easy way out. Well, instead of making this decision and maybe not being popular with people, we're going to spend a lot of money and get the people to tell us what they want. Whereas we've been elected to do that, why don't we just do that? So that's how I used to think prior to actually being in this role, back in the days when I was critical, which I'm not anymore, as you know. And so it's interesting to me. I see this as kind of the only way we can go on it. It's such an enormous amount of money. It's going to have such an impact, potentially, if the decision is made to go ahead on people's taxes. It's going to have a huge impact on way of life and everything else for High Rivers. I've kind of come full circle on this, and I don't think I've come full circle because it's an election year. I think I've just realized that this is so important that the people actually decide this. And I guess, one question I do have, Chris, is I'm sure you do have experience with referendum. Is it a straight 51%, or is there, is it a straight majority rules, and then council has to decide, or council just has to do whatever the tally is? If you could
Yeah.
clarify that.
Yeah, Councillor Masterman. Like I said, the result is not necessarily binding under the legislation here. And council can choose whether to proceed or not proceed, depending on what the vote is. But the simple majority, if a simple majority is received at the vote to say yes to this facility, it gives council a really good perspective on what the community is prepared to pay for. And I think that gives you the green light if council chooses to make that decision to borrow the funding, to complete this project. If it's 49 the other way, and the yes vote is at 49% and the no is at 50, again, council will be able to use their discretion whether or not they want to borrow the money to proceed. So you've got the best of both worlds here. If it's resounding, and my experience with referendums, every time I've ran one, and I ran 3 or 4, we have administratively done the work that gave the most complete information to the public to allow them to make an informed decision. And they have consistently been in the 75% for projects of this nature. And when you do the work ahead of time and you complete that good public information process for them, not necessarily trying to sell it, because I think that is not the role of staff, and that is up to individual councillors whether they choose to say on one side of the issue or the other. But when you give complete information and good information and transparent information to the public, they can be, just based upon that, they can be convinced to vote in favor of something along these lines. Now, this is just one portion of recreation that we're proposing here, and I think that's the difficult part for spending so much money on one segment of recreation. And that's something to be wary of, because there are so many other segments of recreation to be considered as well through any public process. So I think transparency is going to be key to this, and being frank, open, and honest with the public is a key aspect when sharing this information. And hopefully we see and we hear and we collect the information that helps and share the information that helps them make decisions at the voters booth in October.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Chris. I have a few questions. First, just a question about the whole pool thing. Is this plan, will it also fix the existing pool problems or not? It's just strictly that, like the cost.
Yeah, there will be some renovations to make consistent materials. There'll be some new plumbing and mechanical systems put in, but the existing tank remains in place. So there is no other work going on with the existing tank outside of having consistent materials, consistent tiling, tying in the two areas so that it makes some sense and it aligns well, and realigning some of the mechanical systems. Now, those are still details that are still in conceptual phase 2. But we do feel that the existing tank is good enough condition to retain and will retain its life for the next 25 to 40 years.
Thank you for that part. And then my other question is, so I noticed in part of the recommendation that this the capital cost of the referendum is to not exceed $15,000 and that it be funded through borrowing from the local authorities loan program. So I was researching the local authorities loan program, and well, it's not interest free, but it's also, there's some very tight deadlines. So by my interpretation is you would have to get the application in by January 29th in order to have monies issued by March 15th, because they've got this set of deadlines on there. Now, I plugged in to their loan calculator that at 15,000 for a 3-year rate, and it's 0.546%. But Mike, why I'm asking this question is, why would we borrow money when, because of COVID, there hasn't been any conferences, like even looking at the council expenses, like we've been at home. So, and I'm just wondering why is it everything that, oh, we can borrow if we've got some liquid?
Mhm. Certainly, when you take a look at vertical infrastructure, which is usually the buildings and facilities are usually the components we do not save the most for, unlike water and sewer lines. Water and sewer lines are self-funding. Through our utility rates, we can collect the capital costs to recapitalize those expenses. So when you take a look at our reserves, while we may be healthy reserve-wise, total reserves, a lot of those dollars are allocated within specific reserves for specific purposes. So when we take a look at our facilities have been dramatically underfunded for quite some time. And we do not have the capital resources or the liquidity within those reserve funds to fund any capital expansion at this point in time. So borrowing money at this point, and I want to just one correction. There's a typo in the report. It's 15 million, not 15,000. And the interest rate is about the posted interest rate as of last week was 2.232% for 25 years.
So you're saying that. So that you're on about the capital cost for the pool.
Yeah.
So that is a big typo then, because I thought you were talking about $15,000 for the referendum. That's why I was saying that could come out of council. Well, how much do you estimate the referendum is going to cost?
The referendum is the estimated hours of our staff time. We're not going to engage any consultants at this point in time until we know what the answer is. The referendum itself will be covered under the municipal election costs. So we've budgeted about $30,000 for that this year, and that's a standard cost that we have every 4 years. And then our additional costs of public engagement, and it depends on the scope of the public engagement, whether council wants to proceed as we outlined, which is that 200 hours kind of framework, or less. If it's just one public hearing or one public open house, we can certainly customize it based upon council's wishes when we get to that point, but we need this initial indication whether council wants to proceed with a referendum or not. And if you do not, then we take this off the priority list and it moves down the list, and we go from there. So the cost of the referendum is very, very minimal in comparison to the cost of the structure. So the capital cost is 15 million.
Yeah, that's well, and I appreciate that, because then I guess my comments about the deadlines aren't valid. I thought that 15,000, the local authorities loan program. So when are you planning on getting the fund? That would be after the referendum.
After the referendum, when council authorized it by motion.
Okay.
So
and
it may, and Councillor McMillan, it may not, and that's why I mentioned that the posted interest rates of January 19th, 2021, because by the time we borrow this money, the interest rates may have moved up or they may have moved down, because we could be, once the referendum's held, if we choose to go through with a referendum, we could be 2 years before we actually borrow the money or be in a position to borrow the money from that perspective. So construction may very well for sure not take place in 2022, and we'll be pushing it for 2023, if even then. So more than likely construction timeframe would start in 2024 and roll in through 2024, 2025.
Okay, and then I guess my last comment would be about, with these interesting COVID times, I would just be hopeful that people will vote at the referendum, because after all that work, you want people to actually vote, right? Not being like, and I guess there'll be online options and stuff like that. So, well,
and a referendum is really the true way to gather the flavor of what the community wants. When you take a look at the 2018 report, there's 158 residents that responded to the survey and took part in the open houses through that process. And the majority did want some expanded aquatic facility or a standalone aquatic facility at that point in time. But it was only 158 out of 14,000. And so a very small percentage of the community was participating in that. And mostly, my experience is mostly involved stakeholders that have a vested stake in that, in whatever decisions being made. A referendum allows all residents, all voting public, to have their say, whether they know about aquatic facilities or not know about aquatic facilities. They are allowed to have their say in whether or not they want to see those increased operational costs and that increased borrowing capacity being used up. So It's the one true way to gather the opinions of our residents, whether or not they want this to proceed or not.
And thanks, Chris. And I appreciate that the actual tax rates are out there, that people aren't just blindly voting then without knowing about the tax implications. So thank you.
You're welcome.
That was the other big miss, Carol, when we went to the public when we started this. I think previous council was, yeah, do you want a pool? Sure. How much? Don't know. You know, well, we'll put a yes on it until we know what the number is, right? So it'll be very, very interesting, but this is absolutely the way to do this one. Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and everybody for their input. Just a few questions, Chris. You talk about the staff time. I just want to do you feel, based on the priority list and everything that's on the table, that the staff has the capacity to take this on?
Councillor Cooey, I believe we do. It has been one of council's priorities for the last 16 months, and that's been our focus of our attention.
Okay. Second to that, and I think these have probably gone by the wayside, but are there any opportunities, and I know we're talking down the road, for grants to assist with these sorts of facilities and communities? Are they non-existent?
There could be grant programs come and go, and so it depends on the flavor of the government, and especially the federal government of the time. Currently, the federal government's granting program is focused on water and sewer infrastructure, and we expect that for the short term, next couple of year kind of granting programs to be focused on that. It's not to say that there isn't a recreational component. There was a recreational component announced 2 years ago, but it was a small component. Your grants were matching grants of $500,000 to $750,000 towards facilities from that perspective. So it's not to say that there won't be, but we'll keep watching from that perspective and see what's available.
Okay. I mean, I guess you look at our existing facility, and it was built with a lot of community involvement. And when I say community involvement, there was walkathons, there was fundraisers. So the community had some invested dollars. And I think, unfortunately, I think that has also gone by the wayside. We don't see that occurring as much in communities as we once did. The report also talked about the facility as a whole and its age and that coming to the end of its life cycle. So we know that adding a standalone facility, having two facilities, increases operating costs and doesn't make that viable. So is the thought process then, again, nothing written in stone, but just trying to get my head around it, is that going forward, we would be committing to this facility, and as needed, would be then committing to upgrades and retrofitting or repurposing the existing facility to keep it as up to date and usable as possible.
Councillor Cooey, that's correct. That's the intent of this motion as well. Is to be clear, we are making an investment of about $1.7 million in a new concrete slab for the curling rink and the small arena this spring. We've put over the last 3 years almost $1 million into the new roof system on there. That makes it a 25-year roof system, and from that perspective, so moving forward and taking a look at what a new standalone facility with all these components would cost, you are looking in the range of $100 million from that perspective. So it is about reinvesting in our existing facility, making it better, making it current, making improvements where we can afford them, and keeping this alive for the next 50 years plus.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you throwing out that number, because I think that's an important number to keep in mind. I think, we've heard over I know I have heard in my tenure that, it's really, there's some sort, I don't know if it's a template or just a guideline that for a community of 15,000 or less to actually have a closed-in pool is not the norm, and that if you're going to have it, that it's going to be significantly subsidized. And I think we can say that of all recreation facilities, and it's a matter of there's a great cost to them, both building and operating, but they also bring great value. It's about finding the balance and the priority. And I think the best way to do that is through a referendum to understand the community's willingness and knowing that cost. We hear all the time, why doesn't the town do this? Why doesn't the town do that? Well, we can do it all, but somebody's got to pay for it, and that's the taxpayer. So thanks. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Cooey.
Chris, just one question in the motion. You're referencing council used the August 30th, 2019 design concept. Is that the one that was in your PowerPoint?
That's correct.
Okay. Just so I'm clear, I couldn't find a date on it, so I just wanted to make sure. No further questions, so I will ask for a motion from Councillor McMillan that council direct administration to initiate a referendum process to allow residents the opportunity to share their views by voting on the concept to expand and renovate the existing aquatic facility as part of the 2021 local government election. And council used the August 30th, 2019 design concept as the base of that proposed expansion, and that the estimated capital cost is not to exceed 15 million. And that it be funded through borrowing from the local authorities loan program, and that administration prepare a community engagement and communication process that details the impacts of the proposed.
I will give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion carries. Thanks very much, Chris. Big one to get moving forward. Letter of support policy. Kara.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. On January 11th, administration prepared the draft letter of support policy for Committee of the Whole. At that time, Committee of the Whole provided direction to continue bringing forward all non-financial letters of support to Council for approval so that the approval process was open and transparent. This direction has been incorporated into the policy that is before you. And if Council decides to adopt the policy, administration will arrange for the policy to be executed and for communication to go out regarding the timelines that are set out in this policy. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Kara. Two things. I just thought I'd let Council know, as well as administration, that unfortunately West Winds did not win the organizational component. That award went to Bethany Care Foundation in Calgary and the Ismaili Muslim community in Calgary and the Joy for All project of Ever Active Schools in Edmonton. So I thought I'd just let you know what the results were. And then I just have a little bit of an editing thing on the privacy notice section, Kara, on I guess it's page 8 of 15 of your report, or page 413, but it says all information correspondence, it says address, but it should be addressed to council members. And then it gets a little bit confusing because it says R or any of council's boards. So I'm thinking that the R should be removed, because then it would be all information correspondence addressed to council members or any of council's boards and committees may become blah, blah, blah.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
No further questions. So I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Moore that council adopt the letter of support policy, legislative POL 104.
I will give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you very much. No further discussion. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Carol, hang on. You're mute.
I apologize. I was just going to ask that where personal information will not be severed, can we have it just personal information will not be
chopped?
I just
held.
Yeah, I like, pardon me.
Oh, sorry, I said withheld.
Yes, I also like that. I just thought the severed was a bit rough. I guess chopped, as Mayor Snodgrass said, is a little bit softer, but I like the withheld.
Hacked.
So sorry about that. I had that on my notes.
Got it? Okay, motion is on the floor. All in favor? Bruce? Carried. Want to make sure you were up. Okay, next one, item number 8. So this is councillor opinions regarding issues of provincial national importance. Basically, this came up following one email that we got last week regarding our very vocal opposition to the coal policy rescindment and how this is all going to affect. And obviously, it's a very emotional, stressful time for lots of us with as fast as this is moving. But and Facebook seems to be the place where most of this conversation is happening. Twitter's too small, you can't get enough written, and it just seems to be landing on Facebook. So that being said, that's all fine. It kind of got brought to light with the coal issue, but I think it's an important conversation to have, and I'll give you my personal opinions on it with councillors sharing their personal thoughts on these issues on their own Facebook pages, whether it be personal page or councillor's page, or for me, whether it's my mayor page or just my Craig Snodgrass page. And the person who I was talking to made an interesting comment, said, you know, if you got your personal opinion, put it on your personal page, but leave it alone off of your councillor page. And I said, well, how the hell does that differ? Like, it's just, you're a councillor or you're the mayor. Either way, your opinion is your opinion. So here's my thoughts on it, and I'll open it up for discussion with council. But my thoughts are that, yes, I am the spokesperson in the media and everything else for the most part for council decisions and council's actions, etc. That being said, that does not mean that individual councillors do not have their own opinions on issues. And my personal thought is that you have every right to share your personal opinion on your personal councillor page, even if it does differ. When we, you know, if you want to say your little piece as to why you voted for or against something, I think that's completely fair. And you're talking about transparency earlier on, Carol, that's exactly what that is. You can post it on that page. I don't think we should be posting those things on the Town of High River page, but if you want to post it on your personal Masterman's Counselor page, go for it. And if you post something on there that people don't like, well, they're going to be the judge and executioner on you, and you'll have to deal with that, right? But I don't think it's fair to silence a councillor's personal opinion. That's why they voted for us. And just because once you're voted in, you don't just keep your mouth shut from there on. I don't think that's fair. So I just want to open it up and make sure that we're all clear that, in my mind, you're absolutely fair game to share your personal opinions on your councillor pages. Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So I really appreciate what you had to say about that. I certainly have been vocal on the coal issue on both my personal page and my council Facebook pages, and on other social media like Twitter. And but I think I might disagree with you a little bit in that, you know, say, let's take, for example, the motion that we made 2 weeks ago asking the Premier to reinstate the coal policy. That was a 7-0 vote. If I had had an absolute lapse in judgment and everything else and voted against that, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have chosen to go on Facebook and say, well, another 6-1 vote, and I was the loser. And this is why I thought it was important that I vote that way. I support on any motion that I've come in, and there have been some 6-1 votes, and I've been the one. But I've always chosen, which I think we all would do, to support that decision that was made. It was made by council, the majority of council, and I guess I've always viewed it as being a bad sport if I was to criticize council for making it a decision in good faith that I happen to not agree with. But having said that, Mr. Mayor, I do want to say you've done something with this issue that few politicians have been able to do, and that is unite not just your council, but your town and the province. And I just want to say how great it is that you've done that. We made the decision, but you've done most of the heavy lifting on it. Some of us have posted on Facebook and whatnot, but you've kept it in the public eye, and I think I think that's really important that you've got just as Kenny has done the impossible, or the seemingly impossible, which is uniting Albertans on an issue. Unfortunately, it's going against him, but you've got ranchers, you've got environmentalists, you've got hikers and hunters and anglers and politicians, and even some UCP supporters are united against the premier on this. And I think you really are to be commended for leading us on this and going places that municipal politicians as a rule haven't gone to. And so I know I kind of strayed off the question you raised, but yes, I definitely believe that all of us have every right to express on social media or in the media if we're interviewed our views on this. But if I didn't agree with it, I'd be quite hesitant to do that. I'll be honest with you. So, thanks.
Thanks very much, Bruce, for saying that. And let me be clear, I cannot go out into the public with this fight on my own. And having unanimous support from this council makes it easy. And I've said it 1,000 times, I work with 6 of the greatest human beings on the face of this planet that are trying to save the planet now. We had no idea we were actually going to be doing this when we put our hands up, did we, Cooey? But here we are. So, it's a big deal, and we're all in this together. So going back to what you said about posting stuff on Facebook, it's absolutely your choice whether you do it or you don't. I will say one thing that I feel sharing with the public why you voted on a motion is different than criticizing your council. Criticizing your council, we've been through that before, and that's a very harmful thing to do, and the decision is the decision, and that's where we go. But sharing why you voted one way or another, I think, is completely fair, and people respect it, and people want to know. And they decide at the ballot box whether they're going to continue on with where you were. But I think we always have to be cognizant and respectful to people, which it is. Trust me, it's very, very hard right now with this coal thing going on, where the respect lines are drawn, and I think they drew theirs, and I'll draw mine on my own. So Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and I think thanks for bringing this conversation to a public forum. I think opinions are critical, whether they are the opinions of the people on this screen or the opinions that there are opinions may invoke in our residents, the opinions that come from our residents and other people beyond the community of River. That's how we make good decisions. The more information we can have, the better decisions that are made. And I firmly believe, just in short, to keep the conversation rolling, that's the basis of democracy. And without that, I think we're not doing our roles justice.
100%, Kathy. There's been a couple on Facebook, and I try to stay out of the comment section as much as I can, but right now it's quite interesting to watch. And I've engaged with a couple of people that have challenged me because I think it's a good idea on something like this, and it has made me, take a look at both sides a little bit and make sure that I'm still on board here, and challenged me on a few things that have really helped me fine tune exactly what our issue is with it. So it is good to throw things out there and let's have the conversation. Carol?
Thank you very much. And I am really happy to hear this because I've just been reflecting upon how much I valued the newspaper when I would hear different councillors' voices. And that's how I would think, because my job never allowed me to come to a council meeting. So that's how I was basing about who I thought was representing me. Was there different? I liked hearing the different opinions. And I have to say, as being the newest councillor on here, I personally have felt that for the past almost 4 years that my voice has been a little bit halted, because I think it's very important that as long as you are respectful, I do not believe in trashing, but as long as you can respectfully express, because I kind of admire, I'm backtracking a bit, but when I look at other municipalities' meetings and I see that they're on their social media explaining why they voted, I've had numerous residents come up to me and say, Carol, why don't we ever hear your voice? And basically there's been, and I don't know, and I remember being told when orientation that the mayor is the figurehead, the mayor's the voice, and this protects you guys. But I've never agreed with it, because as long as you're respectful, it's very important. I feel bad because I think sometimes the town doesn't realize what a diverse group of people they have, people who really care. We're all working, and under these circumstances where it's virtual, I think we might as well, and to me, there's no doubt, we'd all keep it respectful. But I think that the freedom of speech and the fact that we represent people and that people can really understand why we vote the way we do, even if it's 7-0, but especially those times when it's been 4-3. If it's 6-1, you know what I mean? I just think freedom of speech is integral, and I think it's only fair to the residents and business owners as well, so they can see the different perspectives. So thank you.
There's an enormous amount of censorship going on right now across this country and, well, across the world probably, but it's getting too far where individuals don't have their own voice or their own opinion. And this isn't you're either with us or you're against us kind of thing, and every motion better be 7-0 or get out. That's just bad. We don't have our discussions that way, and we don't have our votes that way. So I think it's very important that everybody is allowed to share what they want on Facebook, or wherever else you want. Nothing else on that. We will move to item number 8.2, continuing our further steps we're going to take into the coal policy decision. And in those that are watching, in the agenda, we had the request for removal of Jason Nixon from Government of Alberta's cabinet, and that's something I flew out there in the media last week too. And as much as I don't like the moves that gentleman has made recently, I just don't know that it would gain any traction. I don't think I think it's a bit of a waste of time right now. I think there's a better strategy to take forward. And what's really come to play now is the amount of destruction and the amount of work that's happening on these Class 2 lands that have recently been opened up January 1st, 2020. And, you know, the one ridge, Cabin Ridge has got about 50 kilometers of roads being built in it, 400 and some holes being punched in it, in creeks and on the sides of the hills and everything else. And we know they're going in the waterways because the land people that do the grazing on there have told us that they're back there. It's happening. And then the other ridge, there's 66 kilometers worth of roads punched in there, and old logging roads and stuff reopened up, and blah, blah, blah. There's an enormous amount of irreparable damage that's happening on these Class 2 lands, while at the same time, the government is being challenged in court as to whether they can even allow mining in these Class 2 lands. So obviously the Kenney government is hell-bent in making this thing happen. And just so that anybody that's watching, this is not an economic recovery plan for Alberta. This is 100% political optics to say they're doing something. There is absolutely, there's not enough jobs, there's not enough money, there's not enough royalties involved in it at all to make this remotely feasible for the amount of destruction that it is going to cause on our eastern slopes. So that's why today I am going to read out the motion, and then we can have a discussion on it. And then we'll move on to the next step. So the position that I would like to take, High River, is whereas Council adopted Resolution RC 14/2021 requesting the province of Alberta to immediately reinstate the 1976 coal development policy. And whereas coal exploration and open pit mining will impact water resources for downstream communities affecting Alberta residents, ranchers, farmers, and ecosystems. And whereas coal exploration is causing irreparable damage to the landscapes and watersheds, as well as adversely affecting the public's access, use, and enjoyment of Crown lands on the eastern slopes of the Rockies. And whereas the local landowners and ranchers are legally challenging the province's rescindment of the 1976 coal policy in the courts. The motion that I will propose is, be it resolved that Council request all coal exploration within the former Class 2 lands be immediately ceased on the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and that Council request Premier Jason Kenney issue an immediate stop work order for all exploration permits granted after June 1st, 2020 on the former Class 2 lands, and that Council direct administration to investigate legal options relating to the damage caused due to exploration after June 1st, 2020. And further that the Council direct administration to prepare a letter with a copy of this resolution to all members of FCM, AUMA, RMA, SUMA, SARM, and AMM. So those are Saskatchewan and Manitoba Association, municipal associations, requesting their support to reinstate the 1976 coal development policy. And I will place that motion on the floor if there's any discussion. No discussion. Councillor Masterman?
Sorry, Mayor Snodgrass, I couldn't let that one go without saying something. I think it's really interesting how much exploration happened so soon after the June 1st rescinding of the coal policy of Peter Lougheed. These places were busy all summer with roads being punched in and all kinds of leases being activated, lots of equipment being moved onto the site. And it's just really interesting, and not interesting, it's shameful to me that how apparent it was. Like those of you who know about heavy equipment and and mobilizing work crews and whatnot, know that you can't do it on like 1 or 2 days notice. You know, these people knew this was coming. There's certainly no secret of the fact that the energy minister and the environment minister sent letters to a couple of the Australian coal companies in 2019 saying, you know, we're changing things in Alberta. It's opening up. It's going to be great to have you here. These were letters that were sent so they could show investors. So there's been, you know, just kilometer after kilometer of roads punched in and heavy equipment put in place. Ranchers who have been impeded from going on their grazing leases this summer. You know, recreation is campers, hikers, anglers, hunters who were prevented from going on in a lot of cases on public land. Sometimes it's private land. The coal company actually owns the land, but with 15,000 square kilometers opened up along the eastern slope from Blairmore to Hinton of Class 2, what formerly was Class 2 lands, where open pit mining was not commonly allowed. With all this land being open, there's at least, well, there's several different companies. I've lost track of how many there are. Companies that are doing this exploration now, and it's just, you know, as I said before, it's people are upset about this, and this is not going away, and I'm fully in support of your motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
There's a lot of stuff going around right now, and I see the UCP caucus has started to spew out a thing called cold hard facts, and you know, it's just a joke how they're trying to sell this now. And I think what it really lends to is, you know, we haven't had to pay a lot of attention to coal in this province just because there wasn't a lot being done, especially down in the southwest of Alberta. There's a little bit going on up north, but down here we just, you know, we don't have open pit mining or anything going on down here. So closest one is Sparwood, and so we just didn't know what was going on. We know that in High River, that a lot of people, they don't find out until it's really going on, that something exists. And that's what's happening with this coal thing. And the sneaky part about it is that the government knew that rescinding of the coal policy would not be favorable to the people of Alberta. So that's why they didn't do any public engagement. They just left it, and they went with the coal companies want it, so we get it, and they did it. If they would have had public engagement at that time when they did the coal policy, they would have seen straight up as to what Alberta's desire was to continue and open up mountaintop removal practices even further than they already were. They would have known that. But they didn't do it because of this, and that's why now they're in court, and now they're just hell bent. We've got more destruction going on, but the problem is that they woke up all of Alberta, and we are going to make damn sure that we have our say in this thing one way or another. So if it takes court challenges to make it happen, then so be it. But they obviously aren't listening to anything that's going on right now. The level of arrogance that's happening on this in a desperate government to try to show some kind of economic win is why we're where we're at today. So the hell with that. They're back there, and these coal companies, most of them are from Australia, and they're just tearing the place in two back there already without even a mining approval or anything. It's just bizarre how this all works. So that's why we got to try our damnedest to put a stop to it. And if it takes going to court to get it done, then I'm all in. But we will investigate that and move forward from there and continue to talk about what our next steps are. So the motion stands. I will ask the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Council correspondence. Lots of stuff about coal. And nice to see Nanton come on board with joining the fight. Love it. We got another letter here this afternoon by a councillor, from a councillor up in Edson. That's close to coal mining up there, but it sounds like those guys are even ticked at. Sounds like it's what's going to happen is with opening these class 2 lands is it's going to thin out where they're mining legally. It's going to thin the market out, and so they don't like it up there. So they're going to join the fight too, by the sounds of what I'll be talking about, gentlemen, tomorrow, because it's a completely different take from. It's almost like portions of the industry are against this as well. So that'll be an interesting conversation. So we're all in it. We'll continue on, and hopefully someday, sometime, the Premier will start to listen. But till then, we'll continue the good fight. That's it. That's all. Meeting adjourned, 4:46. Thank you very much, folks. Bye-bye.